Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode, my good friend Ben is going to be sailing out a new Tier 10 British light cruiser known as the Minotaur, in a domination game on the map Sea of Fortune. The focus of today's gameplay is twofold. Firstly, the concept of objective control, and Ben's going to be exhibiting that over objective Bravo here, and secondly, restrained aggression, knowing when to be on the defensive and when to be on the offensive, to the point that when you do go on the attack, not overextending into enemy territory as to get yourself ripped apart by the enemy's guns. Now this is going to be important in the Minotaur as well as all cruisers at tier 10, because in the case of the Minotaur, what we find is, in my experience, she's a squishy but very violent cruiser. Squishy in the fact that for a light cruiser, she does not have too much armour, 127mm at most, and that's not all over the ship. Very powerful in the fact that she has 5 twin 6-inch gun batteries mounted in an ABCXY configuration. With a 3.2 second reload as standard, they can dump out an insane amount of armour piercing per minute, and with the ability to citadel per shelf at 3,200, that means at closer ranges, this ship is going to be problematic to any ship that exposes broadside and doesn't angle it appropriately, and even at longer distances, this ship can throw out a continuous stream of silver urine to rip apart the superstructures of enemy battleships in particular. Then we come on to the torpedoes. 4 quadruple sets, 2 to each side, a max range of 10 km, and being able to hit for a maximum damage per torpedo of 16,767 HP. But this torpedo range bodes well in combination with the detectability of this ship when you go for a maximum concealment build, as Ben's doing here. A detectability by sea of 8.9 km, by air of 7.2 km, and when firing from smoke by sea, 5.4 km. Meaning you can stealth torpedo in this ship and also do considerable damage when you're in a smokescreen with your AA in particular. Now we're not going to be talking about AA values, but let me point out that Ben has optimised this ship for AA. The only thing he hasn't taken is the manual AA fire control captain skill at tier 4. But enough of that. What's important here, and this is what I really like about the opening of this game, Ben knows now that there's no enemy destroyer coming for objective Bravo early on, because he knows that his friendly carrier has detected what would be coming by the northern pointer Bravo. So instead he's shutting off that approach by now saturating that entry point with torpedoes on both sides of the ship, making good use of the decent torpedo arcs firing forward of the Minotaur. Now you do have to expose some broadside in order to do this, but as he swings around, you can get all the torpedoes off, and it means any enemy ship now that pushes into the northern side of the objective is going to be punished severely. And remember what I said about the AA, where it's already going to work on the midways fighters, ripping apart almost an entire squadron there. And as Ben continues to make his way into the objective, he's now going to go to smoke. But here I have one critique already of Ben's play. Now as Ben goes into the objective here and uses his smokescreen, he has the smokescreen expert captain skill at tier 2 by the way. He's not extending the smoke into the objective too far. And what I think this does is actually hurts him somewhat for 2 reasons. Firstly, if anything's to go wrong right now or Ben needs to reposition in the smokescreen, he's got no ability to do so really without compromising his position in taking the objective. And secondly, a corollary of this is the fact that because Ben starts off firing in salvos rather nicely and soon switches to firing sequentially with the front guns and then the rear guns, what we find is this limited smokescreen in the objective and the fact that Ben wants to take this objective and the sequential fire all combines to giving away Ben's position in the smokescreen, meaning an aware battleship player, such as the Yamato all the way up on the northern side of the map right now, or a spotter aircraft in particular, can look into the smokescreen through the spotter aircraft angle and try to land a decent salvo on Ben. And even as Ben starts to reverse, the shells are on their way, and we could see it could have been a lot worse, as Ben here is only punished with 5,000 HP, but imagine if that had hit fully on. But regardless, we'll take what we can see, and with Ben having taken the objective, in line with his friendly Fletcher, he's starting to pull back. Now this is game sense being applied here, because look at the minimap and how things are unfolding. The game is going through its first stage of evolution. We've seen the initial plays to the objective. Ben's team took Alpha, they got an early gain, but they're already starting to lose it as the Benson pulls back. In return, Objective Charlie has fallen to the enemy team. But whereas the enemy team seems to have split roughly 50-50 across Alpha and Charlie, Ben's team have focused all their resources down towards the southwestern corner of the map, looking towards Objective Alpha and making a gradual swing around the objective. Now this means that Ben cannot afford to get embroiled in a contest via Objective Bravo or Charlie, but instead he has to play defensive for a long period of time, because to go forward at this point would be suicidal, and by pulling back right now we can see an enemy Edinburgh has started to push into Bravo and wants to take a position of aggression. Now it's unfortunate here that the timing of what's going to happen just doesn't work out in Ben's favour, or really we should say the Fletcher's favour. Fletcher on Ben's team, that is. Because as Ben pulls back, he's recharging his consumables and knows he hasn't got the hydroacoustic available anymore. But in return, the Fletcher is coming under increasing pressure from the Edinburgh, who's pushing him really aggressively because the Edinburgh knows that Ben cannot support the Fletcher for now. And as Ben starts to creep his way forward, he's waiting for the smokescreen generator to reload. And I can see why he wants to do this, because the idea is if he can fire from within his smoke, i.e. 5.4 km detectability by sea when firing in smoke, right now that'd be perfect because he wouldn't be detected and can rip into the broadside of the Edinburgh. But as it turns out, the timing doesn't work out perfectly. Ben has to go forward in the end if he wants to try and help out his friendly Fletcher, albeit a little bit too late as the Fletcher's practically dead now. And as Ben creeps out further and further, he now goes to his smoke, but the problem is the Edinburgh has closed the distance somewhat, so that way Ben is being detected as he fires from his smoke screen right now. Now in return, it's a good thing that Ben decided to cut his speed when he did, because we can see some silver armour piercing coming in at long distance. That's from the enemy Admiral Hipper, who only grazes Ben's bow. And that's a good usage of speed control there and the acceleration of the British light cruisers to work in Ben's favour. And now pulling back, and we can see that the second armour piercing salvo from the Hipper isn't hit the mid of Ben's ship, but instead only hitting the bow once again. If that hit the middle of the ship, I definitely think we would have seen at least 10,000 HP evaporate off of the Minotaur, if not more. But now pulling back in the smokescreen with the Edinburgh having fallen, again Ben now goes into a position of defence rather than offence, knowing that he needs to defend objective Bravo, whereas a second ago against the Edinburgh, he was being aggressive in defending the objective and forcing that cruiser out of the game. And again, sometimes you have to be aggressive in defence and sometimes you have to be more passive or very careful in defence. And what we can see here as well is the fact that Ben has an AA range extended out to 8.6 km with his build. It means that he poses a huge threat to the enemy carrier if they decide to use the centre of the map to send planes around the map. Instead, the enemy carrier's got to realise that the middle is not a safe space. They'll need to go either directly across the western side or alternatively take the long route round the eastern side of the map, delaying the enemy carrier's play. But again, here's a bit more game sense, and this is where Ben decides to be a bit more aggressive against the enemy Fletcher, who's decided to push into the western side of Bravo. Ben has observed the fact that the enemy carrier is pushing into his AA and those planes are going to fall out of the sky very quickly. But on top of that, with Ben's friendly CV helping to clear the sky right now, it means that Ben gets the advantage in pushing the Fletcher because he can activate Hydro, which extends to cover the Fletcher within its radii, and therefore, as the pulses go out and the Fletcher is spotted, it now means that Ben can just push onto this Fletcher and rip it apart with armour piercing before it's even able to deploy torpedo tubes, and therefore the Fletcher is now out of the game at no expense to Ben's ship. Now he is being spotted by the Des Moines that was rotating around the southeastern side of Objective Bravo via Charlie alongside the Massachusetts, but with the Turbot's not there to attack Ben or punish him, what it means is the Des Moines and the Massachusetts are out of position to attack Ben because looks between Ben and those two ships a significant landmass. And even with the floaty arcs of the Des Moines armour piercing, i.e. those 203mm armour piercing shells, it cannot get those shells over the landmass, and in frustration hits the landmass, and what this means now is Ben can actually turn southwards to counter the push of the Des Moines, and on top of that, push away the Massachusetts. And on top of that, consider the fact that Ben has now set up a crossfire in his positioning with the friendly Alsace, in that the Alsace can attack from the southern side of that push, Ben comes in from the northern side, and together they can cripple the push on two sides. But here's something to note about the Minotaur, she is not a pusher. The reason for this is look at how gun B right now, or turret B, is being blocked by turret A. And as Ben recognises this and decides to give further broadside in order to try and bring gun B to bear and also bring his torpedoes to bear, it means he gets really hit hard by the armour piercing at Des Moines, and fortunately one torpedo does strike the Des Moines, and the Alsace also put in a good salvo, meaning that Des Moines falls before it can do any more damage, or with its 6 second or 5.5 second reload, depending on how you build the ship. So it's worked out there for Ben as well. And with the Turbits now being aggressive finally, it's a little bit too late for them, and the fact they fired their guns means they've just spotted themselves for Ben as he sits in his smoke screen for a good 20 seconds. And in 20 seconds with a 3.2 second reload, you can do an absolutely brutal amount of damage in a Minotaur, as we're now seeing. It's a little bit unfortunate that Ben's not always given the appropriate lead to hit the superstructure of the Turbits, but there, he gave a good amount of lead, but not all the shells penetrated. And now we can see how giving the inappropriate lead aimed towards the front is costing some damage, but then as we get the right lead, the damage really starts to build up. And that's the Turbits out of the game as they were crossing the northern side of the Bravo channel. Now the Turbits out the game, Ben can now choose what he wants to do next. Does he want to push the Massachusetts, which personally probably wouldn't be a good idea with the Massachusetts retreating. It's got its guns pointed down towards the southwest of its position, meaning it'd be ready to fire at Ben if he was really aggressive. And in return, is there any point pushing the lone battleship right now, when the team's really not in a position to push Objective Charlie? Because again, look at the minimap. And I can see what Ben's trying to do here. He's trying to throw some salvos in on the Massachusetts over the landmass. He's just a little bit too close to the landmass on his port side to do so. But frustrated, but it's understandable. So instead he turns his guns towards the Bismarck, north of objective Bravo, as it crosses the objective as well, keeping in mind here that he's able to get 2 turrets to bear on the Bismarck, and if only he was starting to rotate his ship a little bit with the 35 seconds of smokescreen that's remain, he could get a bit more damage out. But still, some punishing damage is good. And we can see that the Bismarck spotted itself at Ben by opening fire, with Ben's smokescreen covering the Bismarck from the view range of the Alsace, and as the Bismarck now gets behind the landmass, they'll start to disappear. So in return, seems as though really now Ben's in more of a passive state. He needs to play defensively because he can see on the minimap that his team are pushing objective Alpha very heavily. The enemy team's defensive line around Alpha has crippled entirely, and therefore, sorry, I should say crumbled entirely, means in my words here, and now it's more of a case of just waiting for Alpha to be taken. Now the enemy team still has enough resources to make a follow-up push from Charlie into Bravo, and we can see that the enemy Massachusetts has been reversing, but it actually seems as though their stance is now moving back towards moving forward. And it would seem that the Hipper may have moved up towards them, or the Bismarck is tailing them close behind. What if Ben's friendly Alsace now also rotating towards Ben and towards the Massachusetts' last position? So we'll just wait at this point seeing how Ben can factor his ship into the game, and this is where we come into that concept of controlled aggression, or the whole concept of objective control. In that, Ben knows that objective Alpha is going to be taken soon, meaning that his team will have 2 objectives to the enemy team's 1, and whilst the points advantage is very close at the moment, over time it's only going to increase. Then add to that the idea of not pushing the Massachusetts alone, or alternatively even with these ships, because there's no need to, and it would only cost Ben a lot of HP, and we can see how the 2 concepts add together to give his survivability an increase, and on top of that really put the onus on the enemy team to be the aggressors here. And typically I've found in World of Warships, it's a lot harder to push than it is to defend. Because when you're pushing into a point, it means that the enemy team will have the initiative in terms of you have to make the first move, and they always get the ability to react to that move quite early on. Now the Hipper coming around the corner here, Ben's thrown a load of torpedoes down, and this is very nice here. This cuts the Hipper's ability to push around the corner off very nicely, and if the Hipper continues to give broadside, they're going to take a huge amount of damage. But in return right now, I would be thinking that if I've got Hydra active and the Hipper's got 6 kilometers of torpedoes, I'd be tossing up my Hydra here just in case anything goes wrong, rather than using my smokescreen to conceal my position. Now I appreciate the Massachusetts may have been coming around aggressively, but as we can see here, again, Ben wasn't able to anticipate the torpedo coming around by looks of things, and therefore takes it on the bow, fortunately not doing too much damage. But here's another item as well. Immediately goes to use the super heal as soon as he takes the torpedo hit, rather than waiting to see where he's going to take any more damage. Because for those uninitiated, once you get to, I believe it's tier 8 in the British light cruiser line, the power of the heal consumable increases quite significantly, and once you get to the Minotaur, it's effectively a super heal on a light cruiser, and therefore you can recover a lot of health, and we saw that super heal there get wasted on a single torpedo hit. Now of course, Ben's got half his health approximately remaining, just a little bit over half his health, but perhaps he could have got a bit more mileage out of that super heal if he hadn't panicked to use it. That's understandable, nobody likes to get hit by a torpedo. So there's a bit of a misplay there against the Hipper despite ripping it to pieces with torpedoes, in the fact that there would have been a lot more damage management I feel, and quite easy to get that damage management in place. But nonetheless, with the Massachusetts now exposing its broadside to Ben from Ben's position within his smoke, making the most of his smokescreen here in order to be able to fire from within concealment, and we see that detectability by firing from a smokescreen at sea very nicely working in hand. It means that Massachusetts has got no ability to counter Ben accurately in the smoke, and instead the Massachusetts rotates its guns continuously towards Ben's Alsace, and Massachusetts is just going to fall under sustained armour piercing fire. Very shortly, here it goes. Bingo. And with the Massachusetts gone, that means that the enemy's push now is completely blunted. As we can see, the Bismarck is turning tail and fleeing northward, and the enemy's out is all the way up on the very northern side of the map, back in its spawn, which means it's not going to be pushing into the objectives, and Ben's team have secured pretty much the entirety of the objective sides of the map. To the point now they can extend all the way out towards the northern side to hunt the Zal, they can hunt down the Bismarck at their will, and Ben's role in this game has pretty much subsided. And it's at that point we're actually going to move on to the post-game stat screens. The only other thing Ben's going to do in this game is get a quick cheeky fighter kill as he makes his way towards the remnant aircraft of the enemy carrier which sunk some time ago. But otherwise, onwards to the post-game stats. So in what was a rather methodical victory, we can see that Ben's battle performance amounted to a total damage output of 136,982 HP, and along the way he picked up 3 achievements. Firstly, the standard achievement of Devastating Strike, for destroying an enemy ship with a single artillery salvo, torpedo salvo, or aircraft by causing damage to over 50% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool, in this case the enemy Admiral Hipper. Then there was the Confederate, the heroic achievement, whereby damaging at least 6 enemy ships, the damage caused to each ship must exceed 20% of her normal health pool. And finally the other heroic achievement of the Kraken Unleashed, for in a single battle destroying 5 or more enemy ships, in this case 6 ships. In coming on to the team scores, we can see that Ben topped his team by a considerable margin in terms of base experience earned, picking up 2,750 XP. Ben's entire game revolved around the concept of Objective Bravo, contesting it, capturing it and defending it until the very end, and this was done rather successfully in my opinion, albeit with some knife-edge moments, particularly when going up against the enemy Des Moines and exposing more and more broadside until the Des Moines' demise to a torpedo of Ben's ship. Nonetheless, on the whole, it was executed very well to the point that I would argue that if Ben had not been holding on to Objective Bravo, there's a high chance that the enemy team would have been able to surround Ben's team in the southwestern region of the map, south of Objective Alpha, and the circumstances would have been very different. The key thing to note is the fact that every time a threat came into Objective Bravo, Ben used the correct measure of defence and aggression in order to bring the target down, whether it be the initial Edinburgh, then the Fletcher, the Des Moines, alternatively the final push from the enemy team coming south of Objective Charlie, that being the combination of the Admiral Hipper and the enemy Massachusetts. In coming on to Ben's detailed report, we have one key item to note here, and that is the number of aircraft destroyed, a total of 30, with 25 of those being from the enemy carrier player. I personally feel that the Midway must have become quite frustrated over the course of this game, seeing as any time their aircraft drifted towards Objective Bravo, they were going to start losing their numbers due to Ben's presence and ability to deliver an effective AA screen over the entirety of that objective, with his maximum range arrow going out to 8.6 km and at 7.2 km being able to deliver a combination of the medium and long range arrows for 650 damage per second. Therefore, Ben's friendly carrier, either Kuryu, would be able to use Objective Bravo as a refuge to hide their planes or just defend their planes against the oncoming threat of the enemy Midway's planes, and could therefore operate out of the centre of the map, whereas the Midway by comparison had to operate down the sides of the map, meaning that attacking objectives on another side of the map, so if they sent their planes eastwards to come around towards the southwestern core of the map, was going to take a very long period of time and cause them some difficulty and perhaps even start to frustrate their teammates in the apparent lack of carrier presence. And finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, Ben walked away with 511,517 silver credits and 8,375 elite commander experience. To conclude, I believe today's gameplay has demonstrated the two key concepts of objective control and restrained aggression in equal measure, where one did not apply without the other in the case of Ben's Minotaur gameplay, and together it made him a very formidable threat to the enemy team whenever they tried to take Objective Bravo back from his early aggression into the objective and taking it when the enemy team was not trying to contest it. In return, when the enemy team sent in individual ships, whether it be the Edinburgh, the Fletcher, the Des Moines with the support of the Massachusetts, or the final push from the Admiral Hipper with the Massachusetts behind it, every time Ben was there to give an answer, either by himself or with the support of his teammates, and this goes to show the objective control, but also the restrained aggression in the fact that Ben only applied enough aggression to bring down his opponents. Now it didn't always work out flawlessly, particularly in the case of the Edinburgh pushing in and costing Ben's team their Fletcher in return, but typically he had the right answer on the day, and we could argue that the enemy team should have supplied more resources to take Bravo back and get Ben out the game. But this time, the enemy team did not assess Ben as such a threat on Objective Bravo, and they paid for it considerably. Therefore, thank you for supplying me with this game, Ben, and I can see that whenever you see the Objective Bravo in a game, you certainly think that B is for Ben. But for those who have been watching, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. And if you're looking to get into World of Warships today, be sure to use the link in the description of this video to sign up. It's free of charge. What are you waiting for? But until next time, as always, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.